Hi, my name's Doug Wilson, and I'm a yoga and meditation teacher with a pretty remarkable story behind my teaching journey and how I use the practices of yoga and meditation to not only improve my health and well-being, but also how it helped me get more out of myself as an endurance athlete, which I wrote a book about, and I'll link to that in the description. But the reason I wrote that book and wanted to share my story was not to present yoga as some kind of woo-woo spiritual concept like it normally gets portrayed as, but rather show it as what I believe it to be, and that's a type of technology and a genuine form of therapy when it's applied correctly and in the way that it was originally designed to be used. And ever since my book's been out, I've been hoping that it would get to a wider cross-section of people that might not normally have come across yoga or meditation before, because that's where I was coming from when I got into the practices. I never knew about its benefits, and that's what I was hoping my story would do, would encourage more people to give it a go, and then to go on and share their own stories and their own experiences about how it helped them and improved their lives. And today I finally have an opportunity to share one of these stories through a guy that I met at a yoga studio in Melbourne when I was teaching. His name's Dan. He's a British expat, and he's got one hell of a story to share about his recent travels around the world during the pandemic. But just before we jump into the story, I just want to caveat what we're going to talk about by saying that neither Dan or I are medical professionals, and we're not by any means trying to portray the techniques that we're talking about as some sort of miraculous cure for disease or a way to prevent catching a virus or anything like that. But we much rather share our experiences of how we made our own lifestyle changes and how we integrated a disciplined practice of Kundalini Yoga and meditation into our lives, and how they brought benefits to us. And if anything's remotely interesting about what we're chatting about and you want to learn a little bit more about it, I'd highly recommend going and checking out the video after this one, where I'll demonstrate the technique that we're talking about. Otherwise, the other videos on this channel would be a great reference point if you're looking to get into the practices or just see what they're more about. Or even if you're a seasoned professional at yoga and meditation, or you've been practicing for years, there's benefits in all the techniques that we're able to share with each other. So yeah, I hope you check out the content and leave a comment if there's anything you want to know more about, or any ideas you'd like me to talk about, or any topics I could discuss. But with that being said, I think the best thing to do now is just jump into the chat with Dan. Hey.
Hey, mate.
How did you originally come across Kundalini Yoga?
So a friend of mine gave me your book,
yeah.
and I sort of took it away, and I wouldn't say I'm the most spiritual person, but I kind of got a sense that it was something that I should read. And working my way through it, and I didn't, the first part of it wasn't, for me, it wasn't, it didn't really grab me, just because I've been in that place sort of that you were in somewhat, like the whole partying scene and, burning the candle at both ends and all the rest of it. When I got to the second part of the book, and I kind of realized that you sort of utilize this, from my perspective, very little known process, technology, whatever you want to call it, and then being able to create the change necessary to go from pretty much being sort of wheelchair bound to running 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days, I was like, wow, there's something to this. Like, and the great thing for me about it was that usually when you read those kind of books or you hear those sort of stories, it's invariably from someone that's outside of Australia. They've got a massive following already. They're very difficult to access. And just, to go from a sort of a passing interest to getting a little bit deeper into it, it's not going to happen. And under normal circumstances, I would have read something like that and gone, oh, Kundalini seems interesting, let's give it a go, and had to kind of find a Kundalini teacher. But be able to actually go and practice with the person that have written that book and been through that incredible experience and get it from, for me at the time, the most credible authority on that subject was amazing. So I didn't have to go to the US. I had to go to South Yarra or Paran or wherever the yoga studio was to check it out. That's how I sort of discovered it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I suppose right from the get-go, I wouldn't say it was the practice itself that appealed to me. It didn't not appeal to me. It was the impact that I was feeling. it was I was negotiating what was a fairly sort of critical deal for me at the time. Very stressful, lot of roller coaster emotions through that period. A lot at stake.
You mean in terms of like a big business deal and
yeah, big, yeah. So I was
behind it.
Yeah, with big personal impact. And the first thing I noticed, but I had sort of lots of kooky experiences with Kundalini that I won't go into, but nothing negative. But I suppose the first day that I did the practice, or the morning after I'd done the practice, I slept very little, but I woke up and I felt completely energized, even though I'd not slept at all, mentally alert. And I've had issues with my knees from sort of training when I was younger. And I went and ran around the local park like I was a 20-year-old, and I felt no tension in my joints. I was fluid, I was light. And for me, working in pretty much a sort of deadline-driven, high-intensity industry and being a director at the time, anything that can give you extra energy, anything that can give you mental focus, particularly when you're tired, is a godsend. I'd already started adding eating, training, sleep routines into my life to maximize my energy. So straight away, I was like, that appeals to me. And then as I got to come to your class every week, and of course you'd sort of focus on a career dealing with a different aspect of the mind or the body or whatever it might be. The consistent things I noticed was, one, deep rest at what I can only describe as a cellular level. Meaning, I remember hearing someone like Jerry Seinfeld, when he was talking about transcendental meditation, saying, you ever going to go to bed and you wake up and you go, oh my God, I've had a good night's sleep. That's what this is supposed to feel like. I kind of had this sort of experience where I would literally feel a rest that was physically deeper than anything I'd experienced. My joints, my life, I could just feel peace in my body. It was quite substantial.
Yep.
And also, an ability to be calm under incredibly intense conflict-orientated situations, which was fantastic for me, because in negotiation, running a kind of a business with a very sort of high level of intensity, you're never too far away from conflict. And I kind of went from being someone that could be incredibly reactive, intimidating, and aggressive in professional situations to kind of push through, to being the sort of person that you could probably spit in my face and I've been able to smile at you like a Buddha. Yep. So, and that was just me not focusing on one particular career or honing in. That was just me coming to your class and doing, just doing whatever came. And it became very apparent to me that, well, if I'm just dipping into, let's say, a career about releasing anger, or a career about resetting the adrenal system or something like that, and I'm just doing that once, how would it be if I picked one of these topics or themes that was super relevant for my progress as an individual, and as you sort of communicate in class, practice that for 40 days in a row? So as soon as I got the opportunity to do that, and have that time to focus and do that, I did.
Yeah, and you saw the results pretty quickly. Like it becomes pretty apparent that you sort of go through that journey with the technique. You learn more about it. As you learn more about it, you kind of intuitively just learn more about yourself through doing this technique daily, right?
You do, yeah. I mean, the first instance that there's been three sort of main instances where I've applied it. The first instance was kind of fairly trivial. I just felt really great, really rested and really calm after doing the release. I think it's release fear, and kind of it's a fear and relaxation fear. I generally take a month off every year. I was overseas and I was surfing, and I hadn't surfed for a very long time. And I was doing that career every day because I had the time, and it was one that I'd felt good for after. I didn't particularly have an issue with fear. I could always do with relaxing a little bit more. And what I noticed was I was surfing in Indonesia, and I hadn't surfed for months. And there's always a level of anxiety when you're surfing big waves and your technique's not quite there. You're intimidated. It's like jumping off stairs, right? If you go to the top, the 10th step and try and jump off it straight away, it's quite daunting. You build it up. Well, if you go on holiday and you haven't surfed and suddenly you're in big waves, it creates a lot of anxiety. And I can't remember just going in after maybe being about 14 days into that Kriya and just being sat there facing walls of water and feeling utterly serene, really calm. And I kind of started to get little insights about my own relationship with fear, and so that was the kind of the start of it, really. The second kind of time, I sort of sold the business that I was in, or my stake in it. I was over in Central America at the beginning of the year and working on a kind of a 10-year life plan. And I did a Kriya that was about self-awareness or knowing yourself. It was sort of about inner wisdom, or and I kind of thought, well, I'm trying to work out what's right. I'm traveling around the world. I want to kind of know what my direction is. Maybe this will help draw it out. And about 20 days into the Kriya, like literally out of the blue, boom, I came up with a totally comprehensive plan. Locations that I was going to live in, properties that I was going to purchase, business plans, when my partner and I would start having kids, like a completely, like the sort of thing that you has to have massive background knowledge. Literally I just came up with it and just scribbled it out in about 30 minutes.
It's like a huge flash of awareness and insight.
Yeah, and totally comprehensive, like super. Yeah, it was quite incredible. So I kind of got into the rhythm of thinking, okay, well, as you know, there's thousands of Kriyas that have the ability to address a multitude of challenges, areas for development in your life. I was like, right, well, I'm on a roll. I'm going to start applying this stuff. And that kind of takes me to, I suppose, the current sort of situation where I was down on the border of Panama. I was surfing down there. And I was due to kind of go to Europe. My girlfriend lives in Spain. I was heading there. COVID-19 had started to kick off. For a lot of people, everyone was being a bit dismissive. There were there were some people treating it a bit seriously. At that stage, it absolutely had not spread to Europe, but in a big way. People were hearing about Iran and isolated case in Italy and China, and that was kind of it. And it was very much not a worldwide thing. It was these kind of random places around the world that didn't really seem to be correlated. And as the situation progressed, I could see countries on the news not locking down, but just making restrictions to their borders. So if you've coming from China, Australia, I think one of their first policies was anyone coming from mainland China, they weren't letting into the country by the airports. So as that situation started to grow, I kind of started thinking, one, maybe my time frame to get into Europe is a little bit limited and I've just got to get right in there. And two, maybe there's going to be some form of testing when I get to airports. Now, I want to make sure I can get into Europe. I want to be safe because this thing feels like now it's kind of spreading. So I started doing a disease resistance Kriya. I got on a plane from San Jose in Costa Rica and I went to Heathrow Airport, flew into Heathrow Airport via Amsterdam. Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, by the time I got there, it was clearing out. It was the quietest airport I'd ever seen. It wasn't like zombie apocalypse, but it was pretty quiet. I got to Heathrow and relatively normal. The only real sign that there was anything happening there, they were giving you a little A5 flyer talking about COVID-19, right? Went to my parents' house, went round and saw people with kids, all good. About a week later, I went to Barcelona and I met my girlfriend, and that's when the Spanish lockdown kicked in, and it was very thorough immediately. And the problem started to spiral out of control there very quickly. Within a week and a half, there was over, and don't quote me on this because I'm trying to sort of think back, but I'm pretty sure there's over 300 people dying a day, every day. They had, and this is like a week into the lockdown, the government was commandeering ice rinks for mortuaries because they didn't have adequate facilities to freeze bodies. The military were on the television every night. They were having so many cases, they were having to build makeshift hospitals in concrete car parks. It was getting out of control. And there was going into supermarkets there, you had to sanitize your hands, you had to put on gloves. The restrictions are very, very different to what we've seen in Australia. There was no one on the streets. You could only leave the house one person at a time to genuinely buy groceries. The police would check receipts, look at your goods. You get fined between $1,500 and $90,000. I mean, it was the strictest lockdown in Europe, bar none. About a week and a half into that, we were sort of just getting into the rhythm of life, and a few government policies kind of gave me and my partner the indication they were probably trying to push non-citizens out of the country to minimize the impact on their healthcare system. And after a number of these sort of things came out, we decided it would be better for me to go back to Australia. So now here I am, and I'm on something like my third entry into Heathrow Airport in like 2 weeks. I'm going back through Barcelona Airport again. When I've gone back to Barcelona Airport, this is zombie apocalypse time. Mm-hmm. There is probably about 30 staff in the entire airport. There's no one there. There's a cleaner walking around coughing her lungs out, looking incredibly sick. And I've gone up to the desk, ticket to Australia. They've said to me, I'm afraid you can't go to Australia because your flight connects via Singapore, and Singapore have closed all of its borders to anyone that's come from Europe. You can't even transit through the airport. So I said, I've got a British passport. The first leg's to Heathrow. Get me to Heathrow, I'll work it out. The plane had capacity for about 120 people. There were about 30 people on the plane. It was a British Airways flight. British Airways, I believe, went into receivership that day and was being controlled by the government. Mm-hmm. When I arrived at Heathrow Airport, it was a very different story from when I'd left. There were probably 70% of the travellers were in hazmat, like biohazard sort of suits. Airlines were actually going bust. Flights were just being cancelled. Those big boards were just being stripped of flights. And I managed to get a flight via Hong Kong. Having seen the situation with Singapore, I wondered whether there might be any restrictions through the Hong Kong, and there were. And it turned out that I had about a 2-hour window to get through Hong Kong. Otherwise, they would close the airport. They were going to close access to the city, which meant that I would probably have to be taken by the military to an internment camp in mainland China, right into the heart of where everything was kicking off. So I've got parents in the UK. I kind of went, look, this is too risky. I abandoned my flight. I was going back to the UK, and then the UK lockdown kicked in on the radio that day. So I'm in the UK, and really things haven't kicked off. There's only 75 deaths so far, and this is like mid-March. Qantas stopped all of its flights, and then the government actually opened up a few repatriation flights. So I've gone back to Heathrow Airport a few days later. Oh man, I must have gone in and out of that airport 5 or 6 times in a couple of weeks. This time when I come back, it's even worse. There's people with sort of welding masks on, and, plastic bags tied over their shoes. It's very empty. There's homeless people sleeping in the airport. It's very, very apocalyptic. And I had to wait in the airport 10 hours. So it's not like I could just get in and out. These kind of areas that were kind of considered to be massive hotspots for germs, I was right in there. Now, I've been doing the disease resistance Kriya religiously up until this point. And I'd had a little bit of roughness in my throat. I'd had points where I thought like I might be getting symptoms, but I almost actually every night after I did the Kriya, within a couple of hours, I feel good again. I got to manage to get on my my repatriation flight that went into Perth, took me to Melbourne. And when I finally got back to Australia, which was in the early hours of like a Sunday morning or something like that. The Ministry of Defence, or whatever they're called in Australia, boarded the plane. They said, you're not allowed to take any photographs of anything you're about to see or record any of the conversation with any of the people you're about to meet. I walked out through the air bridge, which was basically a corridor of people in medical scrubs with safety goggles, masks. Someone kind of took your temperature. Pretty much, it wasn't, everyone there was treated like you were infected and you're going to be basically detained, which we were. They took me to Crown Casino, and I spent the next 14 days in a 35 square meter room. The window didn't open. It's not a window that you can open, as you know, it was consistent with many high-rise hotels. The access to food for the first couple of days was just a bag with some random snacks. There wasn't, you know, it might have been some little cheese crackers and a pear and some crisps and a cherry ripe or something like that. So and obviously you're just breathing air conditioning all of the time. You know, there's no access to fresh air whatsoever, no provision for exercise. So I sort of formed a daily routine in there. It can be quite psychologically challenging being in that situation, more or less like solitary confinement. And I did that kriya religiously. It was the first thing I did. I had this kind of prison-style routine where I'd get up while it was still dark. I'd make my bed with military precision. I'd do my kriya, and then I ended up sort of converting basically my hotel room into a gym. The marble coffee table I turned into a sort of dumbbell. I had chin-up bars that I sort of, you know, I took USB cables and used them as skipping ropes. So I just did what I could to get myself fit. And I really didn't trust that the food I was given hadn't necessarily been physically handled by someone that was, you know, got disease. Obviously your linen, you know, gets changed and et cetera, et cetera. I refused to eat any of the kind of the junk food that was given to me. I just kind of put that to one side, which meant sometimes I went hungry, and sometimes just through kind of little systems I worked out, I could kind of scam a double meal and build up fruit and vegetables and that sort of stuff. So anyway, it's a long story, but as it stands, I think over a 2-week period, as I said to you, I went through 14 international airports or something like that. I was in and out of Heathrow Airport. I was around people that were coughing. I was, you know, Spain and the UK now have got amongst the highest death tolls in the world. I had no symptoms of the virus at all. There are times when I felt rough, where I felt like something might have been coming on. A couple of hours after I'd done the kriya, I'd feel good.
This is the thing that blows my mind about, like, when you sort of lay it out like that statistically. I know from my own experiences of traveling around the world, if I went through 14 international airports and in and out of Heathrow and stayed in an air-conditioned hotel room and all these sorts of things, I would be bound to get sick under normal circumstances. I very rarely travel like that extensively without getting some sort of funky bug along the way.
100%. And, you know, that was my concern with going into that 14-day quarantine was not, it was really, well, God, like you spend 40, as you know, hotel rooms don't have bright lighting. There's subdued lighting, you know, and I'm like sitting in a room with no provision for exercise, not being able to actually control my diet, not being able to breathe fresh air. And you've got to bear in mind, I'd done a 16-hour flight. I've been sat in an airport, right, you know, one of the kind of main transit hubs in Europe for 10 hours. I then had to, you know, and the food and the vending machine, everything that you touch in that environment. Then I'd done 16 hours on a long-haul flight, breathing the air conditioning on the plane. I had a guy that was sat behind me, an older guy that was just coughing his lungs out the entire time. Then I got to, you know, took the 3-hour flight and then go and sit in a hotel room. I mean, just even those long-haul flights and not being able to get fresh air. I mean, I'd challenge anyone to sit in a hotel room for 2 hours and not walk out of there feeling pretty grotty or have some sinus stuff.
Yeah, especially after flying. You know, after fly, you want to go for a walk or a run to just reset and all those sorts of things. You want to be in the fresh air. It's always how I feel. As soon as I get off a plane, the last place I would want to be is cooped up in a hotel room.
Exactly, yeah. So I mean, this is the kind of thing with Kundalini, I suppose. I think sometimes you can clearly feel physiological change in your body, depending on the career you're doing. You know, if you do a career that's about releasing anger or resetting your adrenaline system or something like that, where it's very obviously physically linked, in my experience, you're going to feel that. You know, to varying degrees, you're going to feel and have some noticeable change, maybe some kind of awareness, like you often talk about. The thing with the disease resistance career is it's very difficult to judge the effectiveness of it, right? Because if it works, you didn't get anything.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, you know, my health and fitness, I actually, and look, I was training too in that hotel room, but I actually came out of there fitter than I went in. You've got to bear in mind, before I went in there, I'd spent 2.5 months surfing 4 hours a day in Central America, outside in fresh air every day, eating, you know, fresh organic produce for the most part.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's just it's very hard to quantify how the Kriyas work, because it's always going to react differently with different people. Certain people need certain Kriyas to do certain things. Not every, that's what it is. It's a type of technology, and the way that we apply it's really important to the individual. But I just really like that story because it just does highlight that there is some merit to it.
The way that I look at Kundalini now, and I mean, there's some fantastic resources that you've put me onto, and the library of teachings is the one that I really look at and use the most, is that, to me, it's a toolbox.
Yeah. And
I think I challenge anyone to not have some aspect of their life that if they don't want to proactively work on it, it couldn't benefit from some level of improvement. And I think that what you've got with Kundalini is almost this sort of bottomless pit of tools that you can utilize and pick up and apply very easily by yourself, that have a transformative effect. And you know, I think there's something fantastic about that, you know, and of course, as your life changes, different things become important to you. You know, sometimes you've got to manage stress. Sometimes, you know, you might need to feel more mentally present. Sometimes you've got to heal illness.
Even working on things like emotional attributes of the self, Kundalini has got a vast range of things of working on more subtle energy and, you know, emotional concepts, and not just necessarily the physical body, which is an area that I think is really interesting to explore for a lot of people.
I mean, the anger kriya that we did, what I would generally do, the sort of habit I got into was I would do the practice with you on a Thursday, and you'd introduce us to whatever it was. Then what I would do is I'd write down what that practice was. I'd scribble down the things that I could, you know, the basic moves or sequences that I could remember that we'd done. And now I'd look it up over the weekend, and on the Sunday night I would do it. I'd do the same kriya. And I mean, the anger kriya, that definitely was you know, had a big impact, and it has such a big impact that I'm waiting for a good time to do that because, you know, I know that's going to release a torrent of stuff that's going to be really good for me, but probably the first few days aren't going to be that pleasant for my girlfriend. So, you know, I'm just sort of keeping that one for a serene time, and probably COVID-19, us being separated by the tyranny of distance isn't great for that. The fear and relaxation was fantastic. The kriyas that are about resetting the adrenaline system, you know, I could feel myself going through a full healing crisis after that. You know, all those toxins come up. Yeah. You feel dreadful and you feel good.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to highlight that it's not always a pleasant experience. Sometimes it does make you feel a bit unwell or a bit out of place, and you've got to kind of go through a process. That's all part of like healing and changing the body's systems and releasing toxins, like you're saying. It's a really important part of the process.
It 100% is. And I think that you raise a really good point. And I think, to me, I mean, I'm potentially a little bit twisted when it comes to this sort of thing. I don't manage, like a lot of people, like you're into sort of, you know, endurance sports. you know, I sort of like a challenge. I don't mind putting myself through something that's tough with the promise of an outcome. And if I don't get the outcome, but all I do is prove to myself that I survived the process, that's an outcome for me, right? Yeah, it's not pleasant sometimes, Kundalini. You could describe it as having, you know, there's moments of temporary pain or extreme discomfort.
Very confronting to a lot of people who aren't aware of what they're actually walking into.
Yeah. And so I think that the important thing for me anyway, and this is just my perception of it, the important thing to understand about Kundalini is, I don't describe it as yoga, and I talk to a lot of people about it. The way that I talk about it is, it's a technique for basically creating change in the nervous system that you can utilize to repair, enhance, resolve, change and better physical and emotional aspects of your body, your character, etc., right? And I think when you understand that, you really divorce it from, for me, there is no correlation between the purpose of Kundalini and walking into a contemporary yoga environment with people with, you know, their hair's all done, the makeup's good, you know, they got the designer leggings on. Mm-hmm. There's a sort of a lot of body pride in those environments. You know, a lot of people who aren't in that space are looking to get this relaxing, chill and downtime. It's none of those things, because you're not going to look great when you're slapping yourself in the face. I mean, there's a level of ridiculousness about it, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's you're not going to walk out floating on a cloud sometimes. I mean, generally, I think that you do, but you're going to have to go through some severe discomfort depending on the career to do that. And they're not all like that. Mm. You know, some are kind of quite mellow. So I don't. To me, yoga really, in spite of what its origins might be, has moved towards a kind of lifestyle sort of practice. There's an identity, it attracts certain people. It's kind of got this mellow, sort of cool kind of thing. Kundalini is not mellow, you know. I think if you really want to use that practice to deal with things or turn around things or enhance things that are obstacles for you, even the process of having to go and do the same thing every day for 40 days in a row. I mean, I'm actually got 2 days left on my
of the disease resistance
career. It's not physically challenging, but I got to say the tedium in this last week, it gets to you, you know, like it's hard to focus and etc. But to me, it is a toolbox for change. And that, for me, makes it more powerful, my perspective, than Hatha, Iyengar, all of those other things, because you are going in, you're targeting things that you want to work on. It's a personal development, recovery, enhancement toolbox. You know, don't expect to be walking into a Kundalini class and walking out floating on a breeze. There's every chance you will do, because when you put your body through some of those stresses that you get in Kundalini, you do generally, you sleep great and all of these kind of other things.
It releases tension at a very deep level within the body. So that's what we do. When we push ourselves like that, it actually forces energy to move and clear things out.
Yeah, I think it's a serious thing. And I think if you're the sort of person that doesn't mind putting yourself through a little bit of discomfort to get to a better outcome, there are a lot of people around that are like that, all segments of society, and you feel like you're curious, I would go along and check out a class. You know, maybe go to like 4 or 5 classes and just like you always say, and again, I think this is one of the big differences between a very universally sort of well-known practice in Kundalini. You can go to a Hatha class and you feel relaxed and blissful, and you get in the car and you're all chilled out, and that's great. You always say, you know, judge how you feel after. I usually found the sleep, oh my God, that cellular rest. It was how I felt afterwards, how it changed me physically and emotionally, mentally afterwards, which was way more enduring than I'd ever got in Ashtanga, or I practice a few types of yoga. I couldn't claim myself to be an expert, but I've tried at least 3 other styles and spent time doing it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not believe that the effects and the usefulness is as enduring or as powerful as Kundalini.
The relationship between them, they usually compare Kundalini Yoga and Hatha, saying the effectiveness of a dedicated practice. The equivalency would normally be 12 years of a dedicated Hatha program would be the equivalent to like a year's worth of Kundalini Yoga. And that's not to say that Kundalini Yoga is better or anything like that, but because not everybody wants 12 years worth of personal development or growth in a year. Do you know what I mean? Right. But it is that sort of thing for those people that kind of gravitate more towards that rapid, fast, you know, you want to get something done quickly, like that suits people. Kundalini Yoga suits those kind of people who are willing to kind of like get into things and get, you know, have that rapid development and stuff like that. That's the kind of like comparison between the two.
It is, and I think it's actually really interesting. I've noticed with your classes, there are consistent faces. You know, obviously with any class of that nature, you're always going to get a turnaround, right? But there are consistent people that turn up, and they've got other choices. Kundalini is not the easiest thing to turn up and do all the time, you know, and especially if you don't know what's kind of coming or the severity of the kriya. Those people that stuck around, I'd be really interested to hear their stories and why they're coming back. Because if I just wanted to show up and do a yoga class, I would not be doing Kundalini every week. My view would probably be that those people that are consistently there for 3 months or more, they've probably either got a lot of, they're getting some impact that's bringing them back. I don't see that you would turn up. I mean, there's going to be people that like you as a teacher and they gravitate to that, I suppose. Although what I will say, and I think this to your credit, is that you don't color those classes with your personality. It's not about the cool guru that's run around the world. It's not like I'm hanging with Rob Rich, or I think you're a very pure vehicle for the practice and communicating the practice, which I think makes it better in a way. There's less of a separation between what you're trying to do. And it's like a good personal trainer. You want to like a personal trainer, but you don't want to like him so much that you end up spending half your time talking and not actually getting on with, you know, when you've got people that are really trying to inject themselves into the class, I kind of think that actually you get a separation from the rawness of the practice. So, yeah. But I'd be interested to hear what those people's experiences are. And actually, you know, maybe as a suggestion, it's kind of worth, you know, as things resume and you kind of get back to it, when you kind of notice that there's a sort of a group of people that are more consistent, actually getting those people together just, you know, sort of every month or so and get them to talk about their experiences. Because I would be interested to hear what other people have got. This is interesting. It's had a bit of an impact. Let me dig into this a little bit. And then you as basically this absolutely incredible elite example. There's not a lot of in between, you know.
So exactly what you're talking about is what inspired me to want to have this conversation with you, because that's exactly how I see it as well. When I wrote my book and shared my story, I was very much, I hope people sort of see this and come up with their own examples. And when you were telling me your story, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I was hoping would come of sharing my story. And I want to do exactly that, is now go and find more people that are willing to kind of delve into it the way that you have and come back and share these remarkable experiences, because I'm sure that there's a hell of a lot more out there. And I hope this is like the start of that, actually getting more examples of that to share with other people and getting more people encouraged into doing the practice.
And I think the thing is, it's sometimes you just need a few more signposts out there to kind of to draw you to something. Like, I don't generally need a lot. If I think something's going to be good for me, I'm going to kind of have a look at it and pursue it, right? But there's at least half a dozen people I've talked to about Kundalini, and when I describe it as this is a kind of a vehicle for creating change in your nervous system, and you can utilize that to rebalance, reset, do all sorts of things, overcome what might seem to be insurmountable mental, emotional challenges, etc., etc. There's people that have been really, really interested in that, you know. But the thing is, unlike, let's say, hatha yoga, you're not walking out there day to day and bumping into all of these signposts. So if I tell someone about that, and as well, like, as you know, you probably tell, I'm a pretty driven person. And whilst a lot of people listen to it and think, oh, that's great, you know, when there's you that's kind of had this incredible experience and basically broken a world record and done it, that's super inspirational. There's a level of that for a lot of people, I think, that's probably not that relatable. And whilst I don't have a big world record breaking story myself, you know, I'm a fairly driven person that a lot of people would look at and kind of go, well, it sounds really great, but you're the sort of person that will put themselves through a little bit of punishment and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There are plenty of people that don't have that makeup, I think.
But that's the interesting thing about Kundalini Yoga. It can still be adapted. It doesn't always, like, because I always do teach on that kind of edge of, I'm going to push people because I like to push myself. But it's certainly like there'll be other teachers out there that will teach it in a bit more mellow of a way and all of those sort of things. So the teacher of Kundalini Yoga actually makes a huge difference.
I've actually, it's funny you should say that, because I have done a Kundalini class obviously since, so I've practiced with you I started more or less January the 4th in 2019. And I was right there until the very last class I could attend in December, right? So more or less a year. And I did do a class with someone, and I've got to say, for me, it didn't feel like Kundalini. You know, it didn't feel like Kundalini because I didn't feel like I was being pushed. And there were sequences and there were things where I wasn't being encouraged to withstand the discomfort or go deeper, you know, and outside of my kind of comfort zone, and that's just what I like. And look, and you know, but look, to me, it's a toolbox, and part of me now, I've been doing this very intensive physical, you know, kind of workout that's actually kind of ended up spiraling to sort of 3 hours of training a day, unfortunately, and then Kundalini. So I've got 4 hours of my day taken out before I even do anything productive at the moment. My 40-day Kriya ends on Friday night. The training program that I was doing ended today. Part of me is going, yeah, I could do with creating a little bit of space in my life and having a couple of weeks. But I know that I'm just not going to want to leave that. I know that I will be coming back in 2 weeks' time and doing another 40-day Kriya. That's kind of the real test of whether something has an impact and it's effective is, are you going to inconvenience yourself to continue? You know, when you already train for an hour and you're putting another hour on top of that and doing a Kundalini practice, an hour minimum. And look, actually, I shouldn't say that because you can do Kriyas that are 30 minutes long. If you're interested in making the most of your life and making the most of the opportunity that you've got, and then you've got this deep resource that you can permanently tap into to overcome the physical obstacles, to improve physical and mental aspects of your psyche or, you know, physiology, you can see very quickly, and I can't big note about it too much because I've only been in it for a year, but you can see how it very quickly becomes a life practice.
Sort of what you're touching on there for myself, like the first couple of years for me, I always had that feeling, oh, when would I kind of step away from it? But I would always have a 40-day Kriya plan or a 120-day Kriya plan. I've worked through a 1,000-day Kriya, you know, not missing for 1,000 days. And it got to that point to me where it became so ingrained into my daily life that I don't see existence without it. So it just, now I don't have to think about it as something that's going to take time or be, you know, a problem to do. It's just something that is integrated into my day. I go through the process, I get out of it what I need, and then I leave it. You know what I mean? I just get up, I get it done, and then I get on with my day.
Yeah. What is your routine, if you don't mind me asking? Because obviously you've got the running on top of that. What's a typical day for you like?
At the moment, I'm injured, but I'm still integrating a 90-minute practice into my morning at the moment. But when normal day for me for the last 5 or 6 years has been get up anywhere between 4 and 5 o'clock. Take a nice cold shower, get on the mat. Usually anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, usually around the 2.5 hour mark of, but that would include like maybe a 30-minute meditation in there as well. then just go through my normal day. Before the virus and all of that sort of stuff, that would be teaching 3 or 4 nights a week, and then a meditation at night.
So what about running? Where did that kind of fit in? What was that?
So running would always be after I would do my 2.5, 3 hours practice. So that would usually occur between 4 and 7 a.m. And then my run, I usually always try to get out for my run at about 7 o'clock. And depending on whatever I was doing, my run could take anywhere from 7 till 10 a.m. depending on how far I was going to run. You know, I was sometimes running up to 30 plus Ks. And then I would kind of come back and do work stuff. So trying to work on my business or plan. A lot of my time would then actually be spent planning for the class. So if I was teaching on a Thursday night, I'd usually start working on that around 3 o'clock in the afternoon and thinking, right, how am I going to deliver this kriya? I'd always make sure I go and relate it back to some sort of scientific principle or something relative to the actual anatomy of the body. I'd always want to make sure I go and research and make sure I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Rather than just kind of running in and just reeling off a few things that I'm not really clear on what they are. I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So I'd spend a lot of time researching and making sure I deliver something good in a class.
And would you eat between the kind of your Kundalini practice and the run?
No. Normally I would not eat my first thing until after running. So
wow.
And I would normally try and stop eating at around about 5 p.m. and then not eat again until 9 or 10 o'clock the next day. If I was starving and I was going, like if I felt genuine hunger and I was about to do a 25K run, I might smash a banana or something like that. But yeah, definitely like you learn to train the body in a different way, and Kundalini starts to tap into energy reserves that go beyond just what we take in terms of what we think gives us energy, which is food. Kundalini Yoga starts to release those other reserves of energy, which is what Kundalini actually is. It's just more of the energy that powers our awareness and powers the faculties of the body. And we're talking now that's something that's not tangible through, scientific instruments to measure it. It's just something that you can only experience through the human body. So, Kundalini does tap into those deeper energy reserves, which is, it is something that's tangible through experience. I think your story is the one that, of many that I've been hoping to find. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share it. And I hope other people kind of get something from that. And maybe if it inspires one more person to go try out the practice, then we've done a good service, I believe. So thanks for sharing that. And I'm going to I've made another video of the technique that you're talking about, and we won't give anything away because it's got some interesting concepts in there of the technique, but I've kind of done a mini workshop to step people towards those concepts, to give it a go.
I've got to have a look at it. It's funny, I actually have this thing, and it's a habit that I've really got to get out of, where I'll do a kriya for sort of 3 days following the instructions or looking at the pictures. And then when I kind of know it and get into it, I sort of roll with it. And I do occasionally think, oh, God, am I doing this right? I should better check back with that. But I'll get to the end of it and just forget. It's actually really mad. I mean, it's quite a simple kriya, but I would be interested. I haven't had a chance to look at that video yet, but I will have a look at it. And I'll be very upset if I've just spent 40 days and kind of haven't quite... have missed some kind of critical points.
It's an interesting point, because that's actually part of the process, is having that doubt towards things and always like wanting, like that is, I do that myself. I'm always kind of 10 days in and I'll always go back and read, make sure I am doing that right. And I'll sometimes realize, I have actually been doing that wrong. And that's never a reason then to sort of just throw it away. It's just, you then just recalibrate accordingly. That is actually part of the process.
Well, I sort of know for myself from having been in your class, I'm breathing out instead of when I should be breathing in, or I've rotated the wrong way, or whatever it is. I'll kind of realize that I've deviated from what I'm supposed to be doing, but it doesn't stop the impact at the end.
Yeah.
I can't think. So to me, it's almost like I think you obviously want to make sure you're practicing it in accordance with the way it's supposed to be executed. But I think there's a bit of latitude there, because I've sort of seen, not meaning that go intentionally be really dismissive and just approximately go and do a Kriya, but I think if you kind of, you know, if your hands are 50 degrees rather than 60 degrees, if blah blah, if you're, you know, if you ultimately catch it and correct it, it's probably all going to be good.
You'll always get the benefits from just doing the process. How much you maximize that benefit depends on how precise you can get things, and then also the intention behind it as well. See, a lot of people can just get up there and do things quite mechanically and be very distant, and that does not maximize it. And that's true to all yoga, all practices of yoga. It's actually what delineates yoga from exercise. But then we open a whole nother can of worms if we start going down that road. But I'll be interested to sort of, you know, hear what Kriya you do next and what you get. So maybe we can have another chat about it. You might have another crazy story to tell in 40 days time. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, it's an incredible story. So thanks for that.
Thank you, mate. And yeah, let's catch up in a few weeks' time again and go for a little stroll and a chat.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks a lot, buddy.
All right, mate. I'll catch you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Bye.